You have been staring at the problem for 2 hours. Nothing. You close the laptop, you go outside, you are not thinking about the problem anymore. You are just walking, watching the ground move under your feet, half present, half somewhere else entirely. And then, somewhere between the second and third block, it comes the answer. Clear and complete and obvious. You stop walking. You pull out your phone to write it down before it disappears. And later, back at your desk, you will wonder why you ever sat down in the first place. The answer to that question is older than desks, older than rooms, older than cities. In 2014, a researcher at Stanford University named Marilee Opezzo published a study that should have changed how every school, every office, and every creative institution on Earth operated. She gave volunteers a standard creativity test, the kind that measures your ability to generate original ideas on demand. Then she had them walk. On a treadmill, outdoors, it did not matter. And she ran the test again. Creative output increased by an average of 81% while walking. Not after walking, not because they had exercised the day before, but during. The study made headlines for about a week. Then everyone went back to their desks. But Opezzo's finding was not new science. It was confirmation of something that had been sitting in plain sight for centuries. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that all truly great thoughts are conceived while walking. Aristotle taught his students while walking through the Lyceum. His entire school was named after the practice. Charles Darwin built a thinking path on the grounds of his estate and walked it every day for decades. He called it his thinking path. Beethoven walked for hours every afternoon with a pencil and paper in his coat pocket. Tchaikovsky believed he needed a mandatory 2-hour walk every single day or something bad would happen to him. He was not wrong. These were not coincidences. These were not quirky habits of eccentric geniuses. These were people who had discovered through direct experience that their minds worked differently when their bodies were moving. And they trusted that discovery enough to build their entire creative lives around it. The question is, why? To understand what walking does to the brain, you have to understand what the brain is actually doing when it appears to be doing nothing. When you stop focusing on a problem and walk away from it, the prefrontal cortex loosens its grip, and when it does, a different network activates. Scientists call it the default mode network. It is the system that runs when you are not consciously working on anything specific. When you are daydreaming, when you are in the shower, when you are walking and half thinking. For most of the history of neuroscience, the default mode network was considered useless. Then researchers started measuring what it was actually doing, and they found something that surprised almost everyone. The default mode network is not idle. It is one of the most metabolically active systems in the entire brain. It is processing memories, making connections between unrelated ideas, running simulations of possible futures, and doing the kind of associative thinking that deliberate focused attention actively suppresses. In other words, the answer to your problem did not arrive on your walk by accident. Your brain had been working on it the entire time. The walk did not produce the answer. It got your deliberate mind out of the way long enough for a different and in some ways more powerful system to deliver it. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Walking does not just activate the default mode network. It changes the chemistry of the brain in ways that have nothing to do with relaxation or distraction. When you walk, your heart rate rises slightly. Blood flow to the brain increases specifically to the hippocampus, the region responsible for memory formation and creative connection making. At the same time, your brain releases a cascade of neurochemicals, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. These are not just mood chemicals. They are the specific compounds that lower the threshold for making connections between ideas that would not normally connect. This is what scientists mean when they talk about divergent thinking. Convergent thinking, the kind you do at a desk, focused on a specific problem, narrows your thinking down to the most logical answer. Divergent thinking opens it up. It is the difference between finding the right answer and finding an answer nobody has thought of yet. Walking specifically tilts the brain toward divergent thinking in a way that sitting almost never does. And your body's been doing this for a very long time. The human body began walking upright somewhere between 4 and 6 million years ago. For almost the entire duration of that time, until roughly 10,000 years ago when agriculture changed everything, walking was not exercise, it was existence. Hunter-gatherer groups walked between 15 and 20,000 steps every single day. Not on treadmills, not on running tracks, Through complex, unpredictable terrain tracking animals, reading landscapes, solving problems in real time with their bodies in constant motion. Your brain did not evolve in a chair. It evolved on a landscape. It evolved in a body that was almost never still. Anthropologist Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has spent decades studying the evolutionary biology of human movement. His conclusion is straightforward and slightly uncomfortable. The human body was not built for prolonged stillness. There is no evolutionary precedent for it. No hunter-gatherer group ever sat for 8 continuous hours. No prehistoric human ever stared at a fixed point 2 feet in front of their face for the majority of their waking day. The metabolic systems, the neurochemical cycles, the attention architecture of the human brain, all of it was calibrated for a body in near constant moderate movement across varied terrain. When you sit still and try to think, you are asking a system built for motion to perform at its highest level from a standing start. It is like trying to start a fire without friction. Think about what this means for the modern world. The average office worker sits for roughly 10 hours every single day. School children sit for 6 to 8 hours. The entire architecture of modern productivity, the desk, the chair, the screen, the meeting room is built on the assumption that the best thinking happens when the body is still and the mind is focused. And that assumption is, from an evolutionary standpoint, almost perfectly backwards. Studies of school children who receive additional movement breaks during the day show consistent improvements in attention, memory, and academic performance, not despite the time taken away from sitting and studying, but because of it. Adults who walk during their lunch break return to afternoon work with measurably higher creative output than those who eat at their desks. Researchers at New Mexico Highlands University found that the specific impact of foot striking the ground during walking sends pressure waves through the arteries that increase blood supply to the brain in ways that other forms of exercise do not replicate. Your foot hitting the ground is literally pumping blood to your brain. And yet we built a world where most people spend the majority of their waking hours in chairs. There is something else worth knowing. The kind of walking that produces the best thinking is not the kind where you are listening to a podcast or scrolling through your phone. It is the kind where you are simply moving through space with your mind partially unanchored. A Pezzo found in follow-up research that people who walked while looking at a blank white wall still outperformed people who sat. The movement itself was the variable, not the scenery, not the fresh air, not the change of environment. The ancient mechanism does not need beauty to activate. It just needs motion. Here is what the hunter-gatherer who walked 20,000 steps through the Tanzanian savannah, and the poet who paced their garden for 3 hours, and the scientist who solved the equation on their lunch break all have in common. They were all doing the same thing. They were using their bodies the way their bodies were designed to be used, and their minds responded the way minds respond when you stop fighting the system and work with it instead. You have felt this your entire life. Every walk that cleared your head, every shower thought that arrived without effort, every moment of unexpected clarity that came not when you were trying, but when you stopped. Your brain has been giving you the same information on a loop in every language it knows. The answer was never at the desk. It was always somewhere between the second and third block.